Hey guys, my name is Heather Jackson. I'm a Pike County Cooperative Extension Agent for Family and Consumer Sciences. Today we're going to talk a little bit about sewing and how it's so easy. So let's get started. Every job has tools, right? Well, sometimes you need special tools for sewing. These tools will make sewing easier, neater, and more enjoyable. You will not need all these tools to begin sewing right away, but the more you sew, the more likely you are to find a use for everything. It is safe and convenient to keep all your tools together. A sewing box will help you organize and store the things that you need. First off, let's look at tools for cutting. Scissors are 3 inches to 6 inches long and have 2 ring handles for your thumb and forefinger. Scissors are useful to clip threads and cut paper or fabric. Shears are longer than scissors and have 1 small ring handle for your thumb and a larger handle for the other fingers. The best shears have blades that are screwed together instead of riveted. When fabric is laying flat on a table, it is easier to cut it by using shears that have bent handles. These shears are called trimmers. Your cutting tools should be kept clean and sharp. Use them only for cutting fabric and thread. Avoid using them on heavy string, coarse paper, and cardboard. Be careful not to dent or drop the blades. A drop of sewing machine oil on the inside of the blades will improve the cutting edge. Remember to wipe the blades clean before cutting any more fabric. When cutting fabric, you may find that lint gathers on the edges of your blades. Just carefully wipe the lint off with your fingers, and the natural oils from your hands will help lubricate the blades. You will have to sharpen your scissors and shears periodically. Now let's look at some tools for measuring. You want to use a good quality 60-inch fabric or plastic coated tape measure that won't stretch or rip. Include in your sewing box a 6-inch ruler or small measuring gauge. Both tape measures and measuring gauges are available in local stores. Chalk, or tailor's chalk, which is pictured with the red, yellow, blue, and white triangles. It's used to mark cloth. It's good for marking. It makes thin lines and brushes off easy. A dressmaker's tracing wheel is also used to mark fabric and transfer pattern markings. You might also want a pencil and notepad in your sewing box. You may need it to make notes and calculations during a project. So, pins and needles. Dressmaker or silk pins have sharp points and will not make large holes in your fabric. They are particularly useful when working with fine fabrics and important items. For knit fabrics, use ball point pins that will not snag the threads of the fabric as other pins may. Thimbles are made from silver, brass, nickel, steel, or plastic. The thimble helps you pass the needle through the cloth. It should fit snugly over your middle finger. There are 4 basic sewing needles, each with its own style and purpose. First, we have sharps. They are medium-length needles and are slender with round eyes. Between are shorter than sharps and are used for fine handiwork. Crewel needles have long eyes for easier threading and are used for darning, embroidering, and regular sewing. Darning needles are longer than crewel needles and have wider eyes. Needles come in sizes from 1 to 10. Size 1 is very coarse. Size 10 is very fine. You can buy needles in assorted sizes or in a package with only one size. Needles should match the kind of sewing you are doing and the kind of fabric and thread you are using. As you learn more about sewing, you will learn which needles are best for the job. For beginners, a number 7 sharp is a great needle to use. There is cotton, silk, and synthetic fiber threads, and threads that are actually a combination of fibers. The most widely used thread is polyester with a cotton cover. This comes in a variety of colors and has a strong finish on it. Threads should match the type of fabric you are using. The colors of the thread should match either the primary or background color of your fabric. When you can't match the color exactly, choose the next darker thread color. Good sewing requires proper pressing tools and techniques. Use a good iron, dry top or steam, a well-padded ironing board, and a press cloth that can be muslin or cheesecloth to dampen the fabric while pressing. Ironing and pressing are actually two different techniques. Pressing is used more frequently than ironing in clothing construction. To press, bear down on the fabric with your iron, lift up, and bear down again. This applies heat and pressure without pushing or stretching the fabric. To iron, move the iron back and forth across your fabric. Pressing as you sew helps produce a fine finished item. The temperature of your iron should be adjusted to the type of cloth you are pressing. Always press with a grain of the fabric to hold the size and shape of the piece. You press primarily on the wrong side of the fabric. Learn to use the tip of the iron to press open seams. Pressing is very important. Do not hesitate to ask more questions about pressing and ironing techniques, iron temperatures, and uses of the press cloth. Using a needle and thread is the most basic skill of all. With your thimble on the middle finger of your sewing hand, hold the needle between your thumb and forefinger. The needle's eye should rest near the thimble and point in the direction you plan to sew. Brace the needle against the side of the thimble and stitch. Knowing what kind of stitches we're going to use will help us understand what instructions are telling us to do. This here is a running stitch. You can sew faster by picking up several stitches in a row and weaving the needle in and out of the fabric. Then slide the stitches back onto the thread by pulling the needle through the row. In this picture here, you can see where they stuck the needle in and out, weaving it through the fabric in even intervals, and pulled the thread through to make a stitch. The slip stitching is invisible from either side of the stitched piece. First, pick up a few threads on your needle from the fold of the bottom edge. Now slip the needle a half inch into the upper fold edge. Pull the needle out and repeat. Pull the thread tight so the edges of the fabric are close and the stitches cannot be seen. This is a common hemming stitch that's used frequently. It's also known as a ladder stitch, but the picture you can see where the red parts are the hidden thread and the orange parts are the visible thread. Next is a zigzag stitch. You stitch back and forth between the edges of an opening and you pull the threads tight as you sew to close the opening. Here's an overcast stitch. This is great for protecting the edges of fabric so it does not unravel, but you make slanted stitches a half inch apart over the edge of the fabric. So let's talk a little bit about techniques for the last few minutes of this presentation. This is how to fix a hole in a shirt. Here the shirt is turned inside out and I am using a needle with thread through it. I tried to pick a color that was very close to the color of the shirt. I also turned the shirt inside out so that the knot would be on the inside. Right now I am using a running stitch to stitch around the hole in the shirt, and it will keep the hole from unraveling further. You want to be careful to make sure you don't accidentally poke yourself. If your thread gets tangled up, you can sometimes take your needle and pull the loop through to make sure it's untangled, like I just did there, and you just carefully pull it through the fabric. Keep stitching. You want to completely go around the hole with that running stitch and meet the knot at the end of the hole. This is a great technique also to use for other holes in clothing items. This shirt was a bit stretchy. You can use it for woven fabrics. If you have other items that have holes like leggings, leggings are really prone to getting holes in them, and you can use this stitch to fix it. So it looks like right here I'm at the end of the hole. I'm at the knot, and I'm looking to see where I'm going to make my first stitch pick up. I'm picking up the edges of that fabric and I'm running it through. And I'm pulling it tight, not super tight. You don't want to pull your thread too tight. When you pull your thread too tight, it causes your fabric to pucker. And we don't want puckers because then you can see exactly where the hole is. Pulling it through. And I'm doing these stitches pretty close to each other because we don't want that hole to close up. We don't want a hole in our shirt. You can see the first hole that I completed on the far left, and then in the middle is a hole that hasn't been touched yet. There's another stitch. I'm just pulling on it to make sure it's good, but I don't want to pull on it too tight. Here, stitching a little bit more, and it just takes a little bit of time and patience. You want to make sure you're setting in good light too to help you see where you're stitching, especially when you're doing small holes and fixing them. So right here, we're at the end of the hole. I accidentally caught the end of the thread where we started at in there, and you just gotta be careful to make sure you pick it out. I'm putting in a couple extra stitches there, make sure we're good, the hole good and closed. I caught that thread again. Can't hardly see what I'm doing now. I moved. So I pulled that needle through that loop to create a knot, and I'm doing another stitch on top of that hole. And I'm pulling the needle through the hole, make a knot, and I will hopefully move it closer where you can see it. We're finishing stitching. I'm looking at the back side of it right now to see which is the front of the shirt. But anyway, you can see where that hole was, where I stitched it up. It is a little bit different colored. Now we're making the knot. There's one more good stitch. Now pull that through, put that needle through the loop. When you do that, pull it tight, make a little knot, and then I'm actually going to take that needle. I want to run it through those stitches that we just put in that shirt. I'm going to pull that needle out and pull the excess thread through. That way we have a little bit of a tail tucked away in that stitch. And then I'll cut those off. You always want to make sure you cut your little tails off. They tickle. And hole in the shirt is repaired. The inside looks a little rough. When you flip around on the outside, where the side you can actually see the outside of the shirt, it looks pretty good. Can't hardly see it, other than the lights reflecting off of it, because it's a little bit lighter. I didn't have a darker color. That's how to fix a hole in your shirt or other items. Now let's look at how to sew a button on. These were a pair of khaki pants. I washed them, they went through the dryer, the button came off, and I'm just going to show you how to put it on. Now that button is a normal pants button. It doesn't have what you call a shank on the back. So here I'm actually marking where the button's going to go. I know that the zipper, I had originally unzipped the pants and then rezipped them to show where the button should be with the buttonhole. I marked each end of the buttonhole. And these pins aren't just for marking, they're also going to be very beneficial in sewing the button back onto the pants. I mark here exactly where the button will be placed. I actually mark the pins in a smaller cross, just for the purpose of that this is going to help me make a shank for this button because it's flat on the back. So I'm lining it up, got it on the pant, and for the purpose of this demonstration, I used a off-colored thread so you can see what I'm doing. I didn't want it to match completely. So I'll go ahead and unzip the pants again to give myself some room. Sewing this button back on. I went ahead and poked the needle through to get myself started. I'm going to pull that needle through and have that button lined up on the pins. And I did tie a knot on the end just to make sure I didn't pull it all the way through. I definitely like to double my thread for buttons just because buttons go through a lot of wear and tear. The button jumped around on me, but that's okay. I want to go through across it diagonally. We're going to put that button on diagonally. And we made our first stitch just now in that button to the pant. Now, it looks kind of rough on the back. It will get better though as time pursues. I'm going to go on the other side of the button to stitch and pull that through. Don't keep those threads tight. We don't want that button going anywhere. Pull it through. I'm going to poke it on the other side. So now all 4 holes have been stitched down. At this point, if your threads get a little wonky like that, you just kind of work them out. Don't keep pulling till you get them all straightened out, because then you get a really nasty knot and you don't want to have to take that out. Sometimes with sewing, you just gotta be patient. Sometimes you make mistakes and you gotta take things out, but this one's pretty easy. Now, while I'm working on getting those threads entangled, I want to tell you that the second type of button that does have a shank is the ones that we sometimes see on jackets or decorative. They have a little loop on their back, and that loop you can just stitch directly in place. You don't have to worry about pins. You have the extra space you need. The shank is there to provide an extra amount of space for you to actually button the garment in whatever way it needs to be done. So sometimes with buttons like these with the 4 holes, you have to make a shank for them because they aren't provided on the back. I stitched through here a couple times the same pattern, about 3 times. We want to make sure that it's good and attached. You want to try to go through the same hole that you went in the first time in the fabric, just to keep it looking clean and neat. Yeah, it's sometimes hard to get the needle to go through the fabric right where you need it. You can see me struggling there, trying to get it to go back through. So we're going through one more time. And typically nowadays your buttonholes are actually made by sewing machines, and they actually put the button in the sewing machine for you, and the machine measures the button and it makes the button hole the size of the button. So here I pull the pins out. That way I can go ahead and pull this thread in between the button and the fabric, and I'm twisting it around to make a shank. You see me, I twist several times just because I want it good and tight and I don't want it to fall off or go anywhere. Then I want to take the needle and I'm going to run it through the thread, pull it through, and then I want to make a little knot. I'm going to run that needle through that loop, pull it tight. I'll do that a second time just to make sure it's on there good. It's going to come loose anytime soon. Pull it tight, and then I zip my pants back up and I button over that button. Oh look, it is a perfect fit. It's not going anywhere, and the button is attached. And we're going to take that needle and we're going to go through the buttonhole, and we're going to go back down, and we're going to finish with this on the back. We're going to tie a knot. It's kind of hard to see. But we tie the knot just like we did on the hole that we saw on the first demonstration. Run it through and pull it tight, and there you have it. That is, well, one more knot in there just for good measures, and there you have it. You're gonna cut that thread and you have a finished button, and it shouldn't come off anytime soon. But if you use this technique, you're likely to be able to enjoy your garment longer, just because those little notions like buttons are what make them great. So I want to thank you today for joining me. If you have any questions, you can email me at hjackson@uaex.edu, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye.